Well, another setback has hit a community near the Canada-United States border. Windsor is already walking on eggshells with the auto industry tangled up in Donald Trump's tariff battles. Now comes another blow. Crown Royal, the legendary Canadian whiskey brand with a proud history, is shutting down its bottling operations and moving the work south of the border. What was expected to be just another corporate press release turned into much more. Diageo, the parent company of Crown Royal, confirmed it will close its Amherstburg, Ontario bottling facility this coming February, eliminating about 160 jobs. The official reason? Supply chain efficiency, moving closer to their American customers. But Ontario Premier Doug Ford wasn't about to let it slide quietly. That's what they can do, and I think everyone else should do the same. Back the companies that make whiskey right here, by Ontario workers. That's what matters, standing behind each other. In front of the cameras, Ford cracked open a bottle of Crown Royal and poured it out. A simple act, but it struck a nerve. For Canadians, it captured the anger of jobs draining away across the border. For Americans looking on, it showed how Trump's tariff war had created a climate where even Canada's most iconic brands were caught in the storm. Ford's statement was loud and clear. He wouldn't stay quiet while Ontario families paid the price. His protest went viral not because of the whiskey itself, but because of the symbolism. Trump promised tariffs would bring jobs back to America. Instead, they sparked outrage in Canada and handed Ford a chance to embarrass Trump in the arena he treasures most: public perception. By turning a corporate decision into political theater, Ford outshined the United States president at his own game. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Mark Carney pressed forward with Canada's broader diplomatic strategy, but Ford's raw, emotional defiance added another layer. The pit bull outside the negotiating room, sending a direct message to both Canadians and Americans alike. For Trump, who thrives on dominating headlines, watching a Canadian premier seize the spotlight was a humiliation. Calls for a boycott of Crown Royal spread almost immediately after Ford's stunt. Some Ontario legislators even pushed to pull the brand from store shelves, just as the province had done with American whiskey earlier, when United States tariffs targeted Canadian goods. The move resonated because it symbolized Canadians taking charge of their own response. Yet the reality on the ground was more complicated. Diageo still employs over 500 workers across Canada, with major facilities in Quebec and Manitoba. The company's operations help sustain nearly 10,000 jobs nationwide, from bottling to distribution to hospitality. About 80% of Crown Royal's grains come from Canadian farms, especially in Manitoba. A full boycott could end up harming Canadian workers more than company executives. Still, in the political arena, the optics mattered more than the economics. Ford had turned Crown Royal into a rallying symbol. He showed that Canada could strike back, even if the blow was mostly symbolic. And in doing so, he made Trump appear less like a tough negotiator and more like the very cause of the instability spilling over the border. The Crown Royal showdown unfolded just as a United States federal appeals court declared much of Trump's tariff plan unlawful. Trump, never one to back down, immediately vowed to take the fight to the Supreme Court, doubling down on a strategy that has already split Americans and strained Washington's ties with allies. For Canada, that legal turmoil only reinforced the need to stand firm. Ford's dramatic protest and Carney's measured diplomacy might look different, but they ultimately delivered the same message. Canada is not bending under Trump's pressure. Instead, it is adapting, resisting, and even turning symbolic setbacks into political wins. What was supposed to weaken Canada ended up giving its leaders a platform to show defiance. And in that moment, as Crown Royal spilled onto the pavement, it was Trump who appeared diminished. But you never know with President Trump, Ford warned. He could pull the rug out from under us in a heartbeat, like he has before. If they lift their tariffs, sure, we'll bring American liquor back into the LCBO. But if not, their booze stays off our shelves. Meanwhile, in Columbia, Tennessee, pallets of American whiskey sit untouched, gathering dust instead of reaching Canadian liquor stores. Months ago, small distillers like Keith Clark voiced their frustration, explaining that 25,000 bottles meant for Canada were left without buyers after provinces retaliated by banning U.S. liquor. That frustration hasn't gone away. Fresh data reveals the boycott has cost Canada roughly $500 million in lost liquor revenue, with overall alcohol sales dropping by more than 12%. At the same time, Trump's broader tariff package has ballooned into a 35% duty on Canadian goods outside of USMCA. The liquor standoff remains one of the clearest examples of how Canada has used consumer choice as leverage. What started as a warehouse problem in Tennessee became a symbol of a much larger trade rift. The Distilled Spirits Council of the United States has pleaded with Canadian counterparts, urging them to keep liquor out of the trade war. But Trump's tariffs, meant to squeeze Ottawa, have had their most visible impact inside America. By mid-2025, industry reports showed Canadian liquor sales were down over 12%, with more than $500 million in lost revenue across the sector. But that shortfall didn't drain Canada's federal budget. It hit U.S. distillers and farmers directly. Grain producers growing corn and barley for American whiskey couldn't just flip a switch on production. Canada had been a stable buyer. Once that door shut, producers were stuck with unsold crops, lost contracts, and a shrinking customer base. What was supposed to be leverage against Canada instead turned into surplus stock, wasted grain, and deep frustration across the U.S. heartland. For Canada, however, the boycott proved both symbolic and strategic. Provincial liquor boards are among the biggest alcohol buyers in North America. By pulling American brands from their shelves, they sent a powerful political message while creating real economic pain across the border. Through it all, Ottawa has held a consistent line. Prime Minister Mark Carney has made it clear Canada won't rush into a bad deal. Provinces, too, have reinforced that message, showing unity at home while projecting resilience abroad. That determination, using consumer power as a weapon of retaliation, has become one of Canada's strongest tools. While American distillers plead with Washington to shield the spirits sector from tariffs, Canada has turned the liquor boycott into a real-world example of how even a market of 40 million consumers can exert pressure on U.S. producers. What once looked like a short-term disruption back in March has hardened into a clear signal. Canada is willing to absorb pressure, while also delivering some of its own. The boycott continues, and now it's U.S. businesses demanding relief. And it isn't just whiskey. The same story is unfolding in other industries. Steel and aluminum remain burdened with heavy duties, driving up costs for American manufacturers. Auto parts face the same uncertainty, creating chaos in cross-border supply chains. Canada, rather than backing down, has broadened its ties with Mexico and Europe, while using its leverage as a major supplier of energy and minerals to strengthen its hand. The whiskey collecting dust in Tennessee warehouses is more than a local headache. It's a warning sign. Tariffs designed to punish Canada have boomeranged back, inflicting damage on American companies instead. Liquor may seem like a niche sector, but politically it hits hard, because it proves retaliation works, and that Canada isn't afraid to wield it. Trump gambled that tariffs would push Ottawa into concessions. Instead, what's unfolded is a demonstration of Canada's resilience and the limits of tariff power. Those unsold bottles are not just lost inventory. They are a reminder that when trade wars trigger boycotts, the economic pain doesn't stay confined to the other side of the border. Amid this backdrop, Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc cut short his trip to Washington. He called the talks positive, but, the subtext was clear. Canada is actively seeking new opportunities beyond the United States. Canada is no longer waiting for Washington to shift course. In the midst of these tense tariff negotiations, Ottawa is making a deliberate pivot toward Europe, one official explained. Prime Minister Mark Carney and Industry Minister Melanie Joly are pushing an agenda that stretches beyond diplomacy. We need to make sure we don't become over-dependent on the U.S. That's why I'm here in Germany, to help Canadian businesses build stronger links with European partners and governments. The message is straightforward. Canada will not remain trapped in a one-sided relationship with Washington. Instead, it's constructing a new axis of cooperation with Europe, grounded in energy, advanced infrastructure, and artificial intelligence. By putting these industries at the center of its strategy, Canada is making clear that the future won't be shaped by tariffs, but by investment. The government has unveiled one of the most ambitious industrial packages in modern Canadian history, nearly $500 billion Canadian dollars for energy systems, port expansions, and advanced digital infrastructure, with artificial intelligence as a cornerstone. Energy remains the backbone of this plan, but the vision stretches far beyond, toward a rebalanced global economy where Canada has more than one powerful partner. Canada has already cemented itself as the top foreign supplier of crude oil to the United States. shipping nearly 3.9 million barrels a day in 2024, according to Statistics Canada. Now Ottawa is setting its sights on Europe, building new LNG and hydrogen corridors to deepen energy ties. Artificial intelligence stands as the second major pillar. Canada is rapidly expanding its AI infrastructure, recognizing that advanced systems demand massive and reliable energy inputs. By pairing energy and AI within a single strategy, Ottawa is positioning the country not just as a resource powerhouse, but also as a rising digital leader. The European trip delivered the first real steps in that direction. In Germany, Canada signed a declaration of intent on strategic minerals, securing cooperation on lithium, cobalt, nickel, and gallium. These resources are critical for clean energy technologies and advanced electronics. Multiple business-to-business agreements tied Canadian mining firms directly to European manufacturers, giving the partnership real momentum. On the energy front, both sides reaffirmed their commitment to hydrogen trade, while Ottawa signaled that LNG capacity would be expanded to serve Europe's demand. For Europe, long dependent on outside suppliers, Canada now represents a reliable and friendly alternative. The partnership also broadened into the digital realm. Canada and the EU agreed to deepen cooperation on artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and high-performance computing. The goal is to harmonize standards so AI products, software, and data security systems can flow more freely across the Atlantic. And it's not just regulation. Canadian companies will gain access to European research programs, helping create a scalable global ecosystem. Carney's approach makes the shift clear. Canada is no longer stuck in a cycle of retaliation. Rather than piling on more counter-tariffs, Ottawa has selectively lifted some measures while keeping steel and aluminum protected. That choice spared Canadian consumers extra costs and redirected focus toward building durable alliances. The contrast with Washington is hard to miss. Trump leans on short-term, headline-grabbing tariffs. Canada is investing in energy and AI, long-term tools of influence that will shape the global economy for decades. Trump may dominate the news cycle with confrontational tactics, but Ottawa is laying foundations that will outlast the trade battles of the moment. The outcome is striking. Instead of weakening Canada, pressure from Washington has accelerated its pivot toward Europe, strengthening ties and positioning the country as both an energy supplier and a technology partner. Far from isolated, Canada is emerging as one of the few nations capable of linking natural resources with digital innovation. Tariffs rise and fall. Infrastructure and AI ecosystems, once established, endure for generations. That's the real story of Canada's response. Under Trump's pressure, Canada has turned adversity into leverage and carved out a leadership role in the global economy of tomorrow. And just as Canada charts this new path, Trump escalates yet again. The White House confirmed that tariffs of 50% on steel and aluminum now extend to 47 additional products. What began with raw materials now covers car parts, refrigerators, baby strollers, even the aluminum used for soda cans. "I've got a problem with that guy," one industry insider remarked. "He's just signing paper after paper, and companies like Cleveland Cliffs are cheering while the rest of us pay the price." For American households, the effect is immediate pricier groceries, steeper car payments, and rising day-to-day costs. For U.S. partners like Canada, the tariffs disrupt exports tied to metal packaging and key industrial inputs. As one frustrated voice put it, "Why doesn't he just stay in the U.S.? I'm done with this guy signing letter after letter saying, 'Tariff the Canadians to death.'" This isn't just some technical adjustment buried in a trade document. It's a shockwave that ties everyday living costs directly to international trade tensions. Let's break down what this expansion really means, both inside the United States and across North America. The Trump administration is quietly making it more expensive to import hundreds of everyday items you'd expect to see on store shelves. And it's not just consumer goods. Heavy equipment and industrial staples are caught in the net too. Trains, bulldozers, wind turbines, rail cars. For consumers, the first impact is inflation. CNN reports showed import prices spiking in July, contradicting White House claims that foreign exporters would absorb the costs. Analysts at Pantheon Economics stressed the reality. American businesses and households are paying nearly all of it, and the numbers are staggering. Supply chain specialists estimate the expanded tariff list now covers $320 billion worth of products, generating about $160 billion in extra expenses, rippling straight through the economy. Industries built on steel and aluminum are already feeling the squeeze. Farmers and builders rely on tractors, gearboxes, pumps, and heavy machinery, now all slapped with higher tariffs. Legacy manufacturer John Deere has already announced layoffs at 3 Midwestern plants, citing weak sales and rising costs driven by tariffs. When major employers scale back, the shock cascades through local economies. The White House's stated aim is to revive American steel and aluminum, but true revival demands billions in fresh investment and stable long-term policies. Instead, the process has been anything but stable. Economists describe it as a strategy that might sound defensible in theory but looks chaotic in practice. The uncertainty, often called Trumpian uncertainty, makes companies hesitate to expand or hire because tariff rules can change overnight. We're not going to roll over. We're not going to kiss his backside. We're going to fight like we've never fought before. Trump's tariff escalation hasn't gone unanswered. Canada, America's closest trade partner, has responded on 2 fronts. At the public level, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has been blunt, calling the tariffs nothing more than a hidden tax on American families. He points out Canada buys over $350 billion in U.S. goods annually. Ford has pledged $70 million in support programs for workers, pressed Ottawa to cap cheap steel imports, and vowed Canada will not be bullied. At the federal level, Prime Minister Mark Carney has chosen a different track, one of strategic patience. His government has directed relief toward vulnerable sectors like lumber and agriculture, while keeping negotiation channels with Washington open. Carney's message is firm. Canada will only accept a fair deal, not a temporary patch that sacrifices long-term national interests. Together, Ford and Carney represent 2 sides of a united Canadian response. Other provinces have joined in. While unions, industries, and policymakers echo the same position, Canada will defend its workers and industries and refuse to be cornered into a weak deal. The expansion of steel and aluminum tariffs is not just another policy tweak. For American consumers, it means higher costs in an already inflationary climate. For U.S. businesses, it adds another layer of uncertainty that undermines investment. For Canada, the response has been clear: resilience. Ottawa and the provinces are protecting workers, bolstering supply chains, and sending a message. No bad deal will be accepted. Trump's strategy may rattle markets and raise prices, but it also reveals something deeper: which nations are ready to absorb the pressure and still stand their ground. At the end of the day, these tariffs don't just shake up trade tables. They hit families, jobs, and communities. And this is only the beginning. For more straight talk on how global moves ripple into your daily life, make sure you subscribe to 3 Daily News, your window into the stories that matter most.